What's the first sound that comes to mind when I mention the death of music? Now I think most of you would say that there isn't a sound, considering it's fucking dead, but I like to think that it's what this album sounds like. To be honest, not even the death of music, but the death of everything. This is, to me, what the end of the world would be like in music form. And the topic itself, the death of music, is really quite interesting if you dig deep into it. Can music ever really die? Is it possible? What actually is the death of it? If it's coming, when is it? But I know for certain that it's the end to this segment too, because damn am I not going to make another cinematic intro. I am saying some dumb shit. So, without any further ado, this is Ravedeath 1972, and this is the soundtrack to the end. Now, first thing is that I'm not that experienced with the ambient genre. I've heard a few albums here and there, I know quite a bit about it, but I'm not really that experienced enough to fully go in depth and like talk about the inner workings of it. So yeah, if I say something wrong, then leave it in the comments below. I'll like follow it up. I don't know what I will do with it, but do leave it in the comments below. I'm gonna say something wrong probably. Here's a few albums that I like going across the top. Yeah. Also, this is my first video, so if you have any criticisms or things that you would like to change, leave them down in the comments below. I'll read them. Also, I want to have this silly ass little character in the video, but I don't have any artistic talent, so I'm just going to use this OC that I made in Ponytown. I don't even really play that game that much, but it looks nice. I'm going to make it black and white. It's going to fit with the video. It's going to be great. Anyway, here's the actual content that you came here to see. Tim Hecker is an ambient artist coming from Vancouver, Canada. He's reached a huge amount of critical acclaim over the years from huge music critics, with his album Harmony in Ultraviolet being labelled the 9th best ambient album of all time by Pitchfork. Check this one out as well, it's really fucking good. Anthony Fantano placed his album Virgins at the 9th spot on his Albums of the Decade list, and Deep Cuts placed this album that we're currently talking about as the 5th on his, which is how I actually learned about this, so huge thanks to Oliver for that one. He's even gone on to collaborate with artists such as Arca on One Tricks Point Never. Ravedeath 1972 was released on the notable record label Cranky, which has seen releases from the likes of Godspeed You Black Emperor and Grouper. It was recorded in Church, Iceland on the 21st of July 2010. The recording location was found by Ben Frost, who later did extra piano as a part of the album. The cover art depicts a group of MIT students from undergraduate dorm Baker House throwing a piano off the roof, which is a tradition that started in 1972, which is where the 1972 in the title comes from. However, the Ravedeath doesn't really have that much meaning. Tim just put it in because he thought it sounded cool, which, you know what? Yeah, it does. After Ravedeath came out, Tim released the Dropped Pianos EP, which is a colder and darker version of Ravedeath that focuses more on piano tones other than the organ tones that we see in the original album. This EP is more minimalist, and it features some familiar melodies which were used on the original. This is reflected in the cover art, which is an inverted version of the original Ravedeath cover art. It's definitely almost as good as the original. If you like this album, do definitely listen to this. Ravedeath's main theme is the death of music, or the lifespan of it, but we're gonna need a new topic for this one. Now, I think we've already established that the main theme of this album is the death of music, but that is easy to say. What actually is the death of music? Is it even real? If it does exist, when is it? Has it already happened for some people? Well, it took me quite a while to wrap my head around this concept, and it's quite interesting. While an art form like music is too big of a thing to really shrink away into nothing, but let's say if it did, what would change in the world around you? Well, first of all, I wouldn't be making this video, and second of all, the world would be infinitely quieter. Almost every single moment of every single day we are listening to some form of music, whether we're engaging in it or if it's just in the background of a shop. And if that suddenly ceased to exist, then we'd probably realise that it's an even bigger part of our lives than we know right now. We'd probably even miss the stuff that we all unanimously hate. Hey, I know I'd miss Carnage El Diablo. Okay, maybe not. But, aside from that, I do know that I'd miss every single little bit about it, even the bits that I hated. And it does seem that Tim agrees with me. Tim describes what he meant by this concept in an interview, in which he says, "Music is this thing that fills everyone's lives all the time, but it's this thing that's completely taken for granted. And it's also totally fickle, and it's infuriating, and it's overloading you, and it's often not good. It's not often done very well, and there's also a system of production that doesn't reward people who do it well. So it's kind of fucked up in a lot of ways." Which brings in another point of view, the people that make the music. How does that lead to the death of it? Well, the uprise of streaming services has led to artists looking for other ways to make money due to the tiny amount that they get from royalties. So artists constantly run into financial trouble, leading to music becoming a more corporate thing overall, which I think we can all say in some way degrades the quality of it. And worst of all, the biggest one is the biggest culprit of this. There's so many cases of Spotify being a piece of shit to everyone involved ever in the music industry. And I don't think I can list them all, but here's the big ones. Aforementioned pay-to-artists. Software is buggy as shit. Easy manipulation of distribution system. However, that's kind of the distributor's fault. Updates are often against the user's wants, and features are often removed. They invest a huge amount in military technology. They may not anymore, but they did. The creation of fake artists to get away with not paying royalties to real artists. There's a good video on this. It's about an hour long. It's not, it's 30 minutes. But here it is. Go watch it, it's very good. The worst free version of any application to ever exist. Let me tell you, Spotify is at the top of my list when it comes to piracy. If I wasn't such a pussy, then I'd probably go out and do that first. But damn, when Bandcamp gets some updates, I'm moving over there. Immediately. You guys are owned by Epic Games now. You gotta have something big on the way. But this isn't a video on Spotify, so I'm gonna stop there. I could genuinely go on for fucking hours about this. Another thing people have picked up about this album is the immortality of music, and the way that it points to that. Whenever a genre seems completely devoid of experimentation, there's gonna be at least that one guy that gets bored and starts making the best shit ever made in the entire scene. And sometimes they go to the top, and it changes the entire music landscape forever. Of course music will die when the planet explodes in 7 billion years, but that's very existential, so I don't give a shit about that. So yeah, that's the death of music. Pretty interesting, cool stuff. I don't really have a lot more to say. It took a long time to write this part. It was very hard. Yeah. Okay, well, it's cool talking about the history and theming, but what does the album actually sound like, I beg you ask? Well, despite being purely ambient and beatless, this is the most powerful album that I've ever heard in my entire life. The raw emotion that it gives off in its sound is indescribable. It's like a mixture of every single one at once. And it changes a great deal throughout. but it never really feels out of place. There's not a single moment in this album that doesn't do this masterfully well. It keeps every single moment rich with emotion. One thing that's so incredible about this album is how it uses these harsh sounds, which on their own would be quite combative, and turns them into these quite calming backdrops. Well, not even backdrops really, sometimes they're the main sound in the track itself. And it's so well done. And it adds on that by having these little melodies popping up here and there, something that you can catch onto, but they're almost like always drenched in this reverb, so you can't really tell what they are. It's like these bright moments are being compressed and obscured by what's happening in the back. Like the harsher tones are kind of getting rid of the more melodic segments in the album, and it adds a really interesting atmosphere. Another thing that really impresses me about this album is how much Tim does to that organ and how many different sounds he can create out of it. It's so recognizably that instrument, but it's so vast in what he's made with it. It never gets boring a single time throughout, despite being made of mostly this one particular pipe organ sound. I feel like this album really improves when you paint a picture in your head, so I always think about this post-apocalyptic destroyed city, but like with all the colour sucked out of it and drenched in like this thick white haze, like you're in the fog. And there's nobody there, and you're just wandering the streets and longing for your life before. Also, yes, I did get that from Fantano, but it did improve my enjoyment of the album, so there's not really much reason to not repeat it here. Anyway, the album starts with a piano drop, which, surprisingly, doesn't have a drop. It's just this awesome fluctuating pad which dips in and out of being a dark, rumbly thingy. A brilliant opener that immerses you into the album slowly, without feeling abrupt in any way. It's the kind of thing, while listening, I just imagine a load of blinking lights before me. It's a really good track, and one of the best ones on here. Next up we have In the Fog 1-3. This is one of the most reverb-soaked parts of the album. The entire thing just feels like sunken and drowned. It brings forth these melodies, but it scrambles them and plummets them under a wall of sound of what sounds like air hissing from some kind of machinery, or that clipping track of a piano burning. That industrial noise turns down in the second one, however, and it lets the organ tones really soften the track more. But it's mostly just a short half-second pattern that's repeated throughout the entire thing, but drenched in different kinds of filters and sounds layered over it. It blends into the back at some point, so you don't even realize it's there. It's become part of the industrial noises that surround it, adding to that hazy feeling that the album already has going for it. It kind of blurs the track in a way, and it's really cool. On In the Air 3, some other tones, such as a high-pitched feedback thingy or a sinister-sounding piano tone, take center of attention, despite being under huge masses of noisy shit that's above it. Next up, we have no drums, and the title doesn't lie. There are absolutely zero drums anywhere in this track. This one's centered around a single fluid melody that runs throughout the whole thing, with these smaller little sounds flaring up and shifting underneath. This track is very spacious, as the noises in the back sound a lot further away than the actual main melody at the front, and that creates a lot of depth. This is the most minimal track, and it uses that to its advantage because it's also the most trance-inducing. I really can't get enough of that main melody. I could just live in it forever, really. This transitions into Hatred of Music 1 and 2. The first track revolves around this screaming melody over this mesh of drones. The best way I can describe it is like a symphony of noise. All these different instruments playing in front of you, but you can't tell what they are. I mean, yeah, it's probably a fucking organ, but it could also be, I don't know, a can of sparkling fizzy water being thrown against a wall and then stretched out for eternity. You never really know with this thing. The main sound is really full, and it has a constant progressive melody. It's kind of like a solo of droning feedback reverb-soaked noise. That main screaming drone at the start slowly fades in and builds up into this climax where it releases all of that built-up power in sync with the ambience in the back, before this organ comes in at full force with this like deep crunch under it. And holy shit, it is such a good track. Fucking what the ball sacks, man. Fuck me, this is good. The second track acts as a kind of cool down from the first stage. It's a more somber version of the first, with these piano tones taking center stage, along with this, like, absolutely amazing bass. Like, the low end on this track is so stupid good. I think it's like this piano tone that's been stretched out and lowered in pitch, but again, I'm not certain. I'm really not certain. You can't tell with this album. The drone from the first track is also here, but it's mostly just used to complement the piano and basses. This track is absolutely ball-tastic. Do listen to it. That leads into Analog Paralysis 1978. And according to my Word document, the analog is spelled incorrectly, and the 1978 doesn't really mean anything, so I'm not sure what's going on with the title, but the track itself is pretty good. The start pretty much consists of only these long, drawn-out I meant to say noises. Start of the track pretty much only contains long, drawn-out notes that flow in and out of each other. It's literally just a wash of sound at the start, with no melodies present whatsoever. It's a very simple track, but that doesn't mean it's bad, because despite its simplicity, it's very detailed and gripping. There's so many layers and it's so thick that it doesn't need a melody to stick in your head and become memorable. This track then progresses in a really interesting way, as it's the only part of the album that features acoustic guitar. It doesn't really play any strings though, it more just does that thing where, you know, where you run your hand along like the strings vertically, and it creates more of like a ling, ling, ling noise, and it's more like that. It's also combined with I think a kick drum. It might just be someone hitting a guitar. I'm not really too sure. That's the interesting thing about this thing. It's really cool. Yeah. This part pretty much consists of only like the guitar noise, that kick drum, and like some static, so it feels quite spacious. Like, I'm really trying not to sound like a broken record, but I'm ending up saying. Next up we have Studio Suicide 1980, which is one of the more visceral pieces on the album. It's like a noisier and glitchier version of No Drums that focuses more on changing the main melody than adding stuff behind it. But it doesn't really need anything else to create that kind of atmosphere, because the sound is so rich and dense and light at the same time that it really it carries the whole track in itself. It doesn't need anything else. The melody itself is gorgeous as it swells and shifts throughout the runtime, and it has this little moment where it just grows and it fucks me. Every single time that happens, I am waiting for it to happen again. It's bassed as fuck. This then brings us on into the last parts of the album, In the Air 1 to 3. Now, when you listen to this album in full, this series of tracks is probably one of my favourite parts, if not my favourite part of any album ever. Like, I can say confidently that all three of these together is one of my favourite tracks of all time. This focuses more on the piano tones that we see, with them constantly being at the forefront of the track. They constantly change, with melodic repetitions being processed in different ways and sometimes playing over each other. Sometimes not even resembling a piano too much anymore, sounding kind of like some of the stuff that we see on In the Fog 2. There's this one that's a lot louder than everything else, and it overpowers everything else in the track, and holy shit, it is fucking ball. And the whole time, that piano is on top of this visceral, harsh noise-esque screaming thingy, but like nowhere as near as loud as harsh noise. And when combined with the piano, it creates these two kind of conflicting emotions that come together in a brilliant way. and these noises are much louder in the second one to the point where it overpowers the piano. But it doesn't stop it feeling calming, despite it amplifying how powerful it is. On their own, these noises would feel quite combative, but when fused with the piano, even if it is lower down in the mix, they feel a lot different. But the highlight has to be In the Air 3. I genuinely can't think of a better way to end this project than it. It slowly strips away all that noise and leaves the piano pretty much on its own. And then it just bursts into this final moment where everything just comes together and plays... I don't know what to call it. Just... Alright, that was the video. Pretty awesome sauce. We're going to be doing a listening party on this album on the Saturday that this video comes out on my Discord server. Come join that. We also do other events. Follow me on my Twitter at Nuclex if you want to see someone posting about whatever this is. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications on, the full shebang. And I will see you next time.